Hey folks, Ron here again. Today I am at the site where Dennis Wilson, the Beach Boys drummer, died. It's actually right in one of the slips towards the end over my right shoulder, and I'm over here rather than in the exact area where the slips are on either side of each other because it's very shady there and there's a little more light here. But here it is, our Marquesa Way in Marina del Rey, California. It was quite a sad ending for Dennis Wilson. Dennis Wilson, the drummer of the Beach Boys, from 1961 to 1983 here when he died. Dennis had a very colorful life. He was the only real surfer of the Beach Boys, number one, and he was a party animal, and he was married 5 times, and he was a womanizer like no womanizer has ever been, a connoisseur of women, and he dated Christine McVie for 3 years, singer and keyboardist of Fleetwood Mac, and then when that relationship ended, in 1980, it was kind of all downhill from there. In short, Dennis Wilson was the drummer of the Beach Boys, but he was like I say, getting more and more wild and irresponsible as the years went by. And by this time in his life, when he was now 39, he was in pretty bad shape. He had lost all his money. He had lost his boat. He had a 60-foot yacht, which is part of why he was here that day he died, and I'll tell you about that in a second. He was single and divorced yet again, and he had been, prior to this, living in a motel with his 5th wife, Shawn Love, who, according to her, was the illegitimate daughter of Dennis's cousin and Beach Boys singer Mike Love. And Mike and Dennis never got along well, particularly in these later years, so it was added consternation, added anger to Mike for the fact that Dennis was not only shacking up, but legally married to perhaps his illegitimate daughter. And then they had a baby named Gage. Dennis was very close to the baby, Gage, the son, and that was pretty much the only thing keeping him going. But Shawn had kicked him out of the motel in Santa Monica they were living in on a weekly basis. And at this point in his life, around Christmas 1983, Dennis was just crashing on whosever couch he could find. He could no longer afford cocaine or drugs, so it was down to just alcohol. And he was as serious an alcoholic as you could be. So it was a pretty bad time. I mean, Dennis, at this point, who was sort of still the drummer for the Beach Boys, but since the guys really didn't want him to play, or felt that, if he didn't clean up his act, he wouldn't be allowed to play anymore, he was homeless and destitute, and he was literally a homeless guy at this point, except for the good grace of friends. And, an alcoholic who days earlier was in treatment, in treatment at Santa Monica Hospital, but he left. He said he wanted to see the baby and he wanted to see Shawn on Christmas, and he unfortunately never made it back to the hospital for detoxing. Obviously he hadn't hit bottom yet, but that's another story, in his mind anyway. So he came over here because he had a friend named Bill Oster who had a boat behind me, a pretty large boat, not as large as Dennis's 60-foot yacht, but a large boat nonetheless. Dennis at that time was with a girl he had known for a couple of weeks named Colleen McGovern, who went by the name of Crystal. Gosh, if she was any more than 19, I'd have to research it, but I'd be surprised. She's very young. And according to her, they did spend the night before on Bill's boat. And according to her, that last night, Dennis was sweating and he couldn't sleep and bemoaning the fact that he was in a panic all the time. He was an emotional wreck. He said he couldn't sleep. He said he was lonely. He didn't feel loved. He had no future. Pretty bad shape. So the next morning, Dennis, being the friendly guy that he was, the gregarious guy that he was, he got up early. He was partying with Bill and his people and with Colleen, with Crystal, and he was drinking and doing a lot of drinking. And one of the reasons he was there is because Bill kept his boat across a slip across the way is where Dennis's boat, the Harmony, had been, and Dennis had some of the best times of his life on that boat, with other people and with himself and with Christine McVie until they broke up. Now he lost the boat in 1980 to have to pay for back taxes, which probably were never paid. And as I say, Dennis was destitute by this time anyway, and the Beach Boys probably weren't going to allow him to tour with them, which would have been his only his only source of income anyway. But the slip was empty, and the Harmony, Dennis's boat, had been there. So Dennis decided, after breakfast and with all this drinking, to go diving where the Harmony had been, to look for relics and things like that. He was in a pair of cut-off jeans, and that's about it, except for some flippers. It was December 28th, 1983, so it was quite cold. Actually, we're about a week away from that right now. It's a nice day here, but it's 66 degrees right now. But by 4 or 5 o'clock at the time he was diving, it'll be probably maybe 60 degrees, which doesn't sound cold, but the water is pretty damn cold. It's 13 feet deep. So Dennis went diving. He found a picture frame that he had thrown overboard in a fight with Karen Lamb, who was his wife twice, 1976 and in 1978. But again, like I say, they were divorced. He was yet again single after the divorce to Sean. But he found some things, and he was looking for some things under there that he had thrown overboard or had fallen overboard. And Dennis kept coming to the surface and diving and coming to the surface. And Bill saw him, and then there was a period where he just didn't see him or hear him anymore. He didn't come to the surface. So Bill and the girls were looking for him and stomping on the deck and couldn't find him. It was getting dark by this time. So finally, one of the Coast Guard boats actually happened to come by, and they summoned them. And the Coast Guard guy said, "Oh, we know his reputation. He's probably out at one of the restaurants or the bars." So they called the restaurants and the bars. Nobody had seen him. He wasn't there. Finally, a dive team got out, and it was already dark by that time, and they found him. They found Dennis curled up in a fetal position, which was very unusual, and we might want to research drowning in a fetal position, because there are kind of different schools of thought on that. But they did find him, unfortunately, dead on the bottom, on the 13-foot, at the bottom of the, at the 13-foot level of the marina here. And the press descended here, obviously, and it was, a terrible end for a guy who was very animated and charismatic, and women loved him, and guys loved him, and he was a pretty good drummer, and he did a great solo album called Pacific Ocean Blue back in '76, and he was working on another one called Bamboo, but never finished. It was abandoned. His talents were never fully realized within the Beach Boys. Soulful voice, great singer, but incredibly and totally self-destructive. So I'm going to do some other videos later and show you some of Dennis's haunts here in the marina in Santa Monica. But for now, this was the sad ending for Dennis Wilson. And just a few years earlier, he was renting large homes out in Malibu. And look him up if you haven't researched him. He, one day, when he had a large house near Will Rogers' house off Sunset, the former Will Rogers' house off Sunset Boulevard, picked up a couple of the Manson family girls. Unbeknownst to him, they were with the Manson family in 1968. Invited them back to have fun with them. And later that night, after a recording session, Denny Wilson came home, and the entire Manson family, including Charles Manson, was there in the house. Once Dennis was convinced they weren't going to hurt or kill him, he invited them to stay and live there because he had all these girls to play with every night. It was a party every day and a party every night. But many say that experience with the Manson family, Dennis was never the same again, I should say, including the drugs that he did with them, and just under kind of a pseudo influence of Charlie Manson. And he would never speak of that period again. It was very traumatic to him. And as I said, many people said that he was never the same afterwards. And unfortunately, the Manson family was in jail, but alive and well, and Denny ended up here in the water, dead at the age of 39. Anyway, so that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed. And if you like these videos, if you like my channel, please like and please subscribe. I'm Ron, and will be more to come. Okay, we'll see y'all later, and have a great one. Bye. Thank you.